So it's been about 6 years since I switched from using a full frame system to using the Fuji system. And I still get a lot of emails, a lot of questions asking me whether it's possible to use the Fuji system professionally, and if I have any regrets about switching, if I'm thinking about switching back, questions like that. Now, I'm a full-time landscape photographer. It's where all of my income comes from, primarily from things like workshops and prints, and to a lesser extent, licensing, books, campaigns, and speaking and stuff like that. So basically, cameras are the tool of my trade, and if they don't work for what I'm doing, if they let me down in any way, then I wouldn't be using them. Now, landscape photography was the first aspect of photography that I fell in love with. I used to go to the coast near my house and photograph the ocean there. But professionally, what I did first was fall into wedding photography accidentally, like I think quite a few wedding photographers do. And I did wedding photography for about 5 or 6 years. Now, as soon as I turned professional in wedding photography, I went out and invested in professional kits. So for the 5 or 6 years that I was shooting weddings, I was using first off a Nikon D3 and then later a Nikon D800 with lots of fast f2.8 and fast prime lenses for weddings to shoot in low light and to get really nice fast shots, and also a big flash system and stuff like that. But I always loved landscape photography, so whenever I could, whenever I had the opportunity, I would go and make some trips somewhere and just shoot landscapes, just shoot travel photography, and I'd take my big heavy Nikon kit with me. But after about 6 years, I was getting pretty jaded with wedding photography. It just wasn't where my passion lied. It wasn't what I really wanted to do. And on top of that, I found that it had also made me quite disillusioned with photography overall. I found that I was less inclined to take my camera with me whenever I went out hiking. The idea of just taking this great big heavy gear with me, putting it in my backpack, just really felt like it was going to slow down and ruin the hike. And I'd lost a lot of the joy in taking photographs. I'd lost a lot of just the simple pleasure of being out there with my camera, and it was just something that just wasn't there anymore. So it was around that time that I went out and bought the Fujifilm X-T10, and the idea behind that camera was that it was just going to be a carry-around camera, something I could drop in my bag and use to take shots, but it was never something that I thought I was going to use seriously. And I just really loved using it. I immediately sort of fell in love with the analog controls, and it just felt to me really intuitive to use. Now, I'm a big believer in the intuitiveness of cameras. A camera should be an extension of your hand, and it should be an extension of your eye, and it should be an extension of your mind. When you're out in a location, in the scene, when you're looking at the scene and you're thinking about how to compose it, the camera really needs to get out of your way. It needs to be something that's almost invisible, so you can translate what you're seeing with your eyes into what you see in the viewfinder or on the LCD almost automatically, almost without thinking. If you have to dive into menus or fiddle around with the controls, all of those things are taking away from the joy of photography. They're getting in the way of your vision. So the camera needs to really be as invisible as possible. And that was one of the things that I really did feel straight away about the controls of the Fuji, about the ease of use and about the intuitiveness of it. And that just straight away started to bring a lot of the joy back to the photography that I was doing. So right from the start, when the X-T10 had reignited my love for photography, I decided to invest in an X-T1 and a couple of lenses and take them on a trip with me. And I made the decision to leave my big camera, my proper camera, my Nikon gear at home and just see if I could shoot with just the two cameras, with just the Fuji system, and how I got on. Now, during that trip, I was shooting a lot of travel photography, so I was doing travel portraits and stuff like that. I was also doing quite a lot of landscapes and even some astrophotography. And what I realized is that there hadn't been a single time when I'd missed my old camera system. There hadn't been any occasion, any shooting situation when I thought, I can't do this with the Fuji's. I really wish I had my full frame gear with me now. And that for me was a big turning point. It was quite liberating to realize that I didn't need this great, big, massive, heavy system to be able to get the kind of shots that I wanted to, the kind of shots that I was envisioning before a trip and while I was on the trip. And that when I came back from the trip, I was really satisfied with the images that I'd taken. Now, when I switched, weight was a big factor in it for me. The camera that I was using was a Nikon D800E, which was a heavy camera. It actually weighed more than the two Fuji bodies that I replaced it with, the X-T1 and the X-T10. It weighed more than those two combined. And it's really nice to be able to carry two bodies, to be able to have that little bit of security in case the camera fails, and also to not have to switch lenses so much because you can have a lens on each body. And I found using a much lighter system really, really liberating. And while the bodies were lighter than the DSLR, the lenses were also quite a bit lighter as well, because APS-C sensors are smaller, so they need less glass to cover them in the lenses. So the more lenses that you carry, the more the weight magnifies when you're using a full frame system. So I really felt the difference between the much smaller, much lighter lenses that I was carrying, and that has additional benefits as well, in that you can take a smaller, lighter tripod, a travel tripod. I don't need such a big, sturdy, heavy tripod because the camera that I'm using, it isn't quite so heavy, and I could have a smaller and lighter backpack. So there were all these kind of additional benefits that came with the weight, and I found that my weight savings were almost like 2 kilograms in a backpack. And for someone who really likes hiking and really likes to walk a long way to get the shots, that actually makes a big difference. It makes a big difference in how much I enjoy the hike. And it means that before I'm going out, I wasn't having those kind of conversations with myself about, do I really need to take this lens? Should I leave this at home because it's a little bit heavy? And things like that. So it does make a big difference. I also felt that there wasn't really any downgrade in the robustness and the sturdiness of the cameras. The X-T1, X-T2, X-T3, X-T4, they're all really well-built, solid cameras. And in the 6 years that I've been using them, I've never had one fail. And I've taken them all over the world. I've shot with them in all kinds of bad weather, temperatures down to about -28, lots of freezing blizzards, below glaciers, in sandstorms, in deserts, in waterfalls next to the coast and stuff like that. And they've proved to be just as reliable as my old Nikon bodies were. Even some of the less robust bodies, things like the X-T20, X-T30, and the lenses that I use, the 10-24 or the 55-200, I've used those in all kinds of conditions, and I've not had any failure. I've not had any problems with them. So I don't have any doubts in their strength and durability. But since I switched to Fuji, a lot more, most brands now have a mirrorless system. So you've got Sony, Nikon, and Canon now have mirrorless systems. And the bodies of those cameras don't really weigh that much more than modern Fuji cameras, because the X-T4 is a heavier camera. It's about 150 grams heavier than the X-T1 was. The Fuji cameras have been getting progressively heavier as they've introduced things like image stabilization. So there's not really a huge amount of difference between the bodies of an APS-C Fuji system and a full-frame Nikon or Sony mirrorless system. However, there is a difference when in the lenses. The lenses are always going to be smaller and lighter, and as soon as you start to carry 2 or 3 lenses with you into the field, then you really do notice the difference in the weight that you're carrying on your back. So now that there are full-frame systems from people like Sony or Nikon that only weigh a little bit more, do I ever think about switching back to full-frame? And the answer is no, because while weight was a big part of why I switched and the joy and liberation that I felt from switching to the Fuji system, it wasn't the only part. If it was only about weight, then you can go even lighter. You can get something like the Olympus 4/3 system. But that wasn't really the full reason. That wasn't why I got that joy of photography back. It still comes back to that feel of the camera as a creative tool and the way that a camera can help me achieve the kind of images that I want to do, to be as intuitive and effortless and invisible as possible that I was talking about earlier. And for me personally, the Fuji cameras really do give me that. Now, the feel of the camera and the weight of the camera, those things are really important, but they don't really matter at all if the image quality isn't there to get the job done. Now, image quality is obviously really important in a camera, but it's not the most defining thing in photography or the camera that you use. It's not the resolution of the camera. The absolute image quality isn't how I define whether my images are successful, and it's not how I choose which images I'm happy with or which images I'm not happy with. But let's first start with the fact that pretty much every camera that you can buy today offers you excellent quality. Some cameras have got more dynamic range, some cameras have got more resolution or better autofocus performance. If you use a full frame camera, then you're going to find a slight improvement in dynamic range over an APS-C, better low light performance over a smaller APS-C sensor. And if you jump up again to medium format, then those things are going to be improved still further. However, a camera having more resolution or more dynamic range doesn't make the other camera, the one that isn't quite so strong in those areas, doesn't make it anything else than an excellent camera. And it doesn't mean that it's not capable of taking excellent photographs or getting the kind of images that you really, really want to. If all we cared about was having the absolute best image quality that we could, then we would probably all be using medium format digital or large format film, but we're not. Simply because when we choose a camera, we make a balance of all the different factors that are important to us. And for sure, image quality is absolutely one of those and one of the most important. But it isn't the most defining because every camera has excellent image quality. What happens is that we look at all the different aspects of a camera, of which image quality is undeniably one of the most important. And then we mix that with other things like the weight of a camera, the lens range of a particular system, things like autofocus, how easy it is to use, how good it feels to use, and then more abstract things that are a little bit harder to pin down, things like brand loyalty and the associations that we've had with other cameras from that particular brand, stuff like that. And then we choose what's the best camera for us. And that's basically what it comes down to. There isn't an absolute best camera, and the camera that's the best for us almost always isn't going to be the one that's got the absolute best image quality. So what it comes down to with image quality is that we have a definition in our own heads of what we expect, of what image quality is good enough. And for me personally, my definition of the image quality that is good enough is what's acceptable for me professionally, what I can use professionally in terms of print sales and in terms of licensing images, and also how successful in capturing the things that are important to me in my definition of a good image. So things like the mood of the image. And in that way, then a 16 megapixel image can be just as good as a medium format 50 megapixel image if it captures the scene in the way that I really wanted to capture the scene. Now, I do occasionally shoot medium format digital with a 50 megapixel camera. Sometimes Fuji have projects that they want me to do, so I'll take the GFX away with me on a trip. And every single time that I use it, I do really love using the camera. It's an amazing camera, it really takes beautiful images. And then when I get home and I put the images into Lightroom and you zoom in and you see all the detail, all the resolution, it really does make me smile. They really are beautiful images. However, what I find is that 2 weeks, 3 weeks down the line, a month down the line, all those images sit together on my hard drive. So my images will be stored in terms of date and location. And if a client contacts me for a particular image or for a print or something like that, or when I'm looking at images to illustrate the website or something, I don't really differentiate between the medium format camera and the APS-C system. I don't look at the images and go, okay, this one is from medium format. They're just images. The only thing that I define is how successful that image is in terms of capturing the scene. So if a client wants a particular image, or if I'm choosing which images to print, then I will choose the image that does that best. And I don't really give a moment's thought to the resolution of that image, because as long as the resolution is significant, is sufficient for the purpose that I have, which is basically I'm never going to be printing more than 1 meter wide, and pretty much everything, every modern camera now is going to be fine for most licensing use, then it's good enough. So I've never had any complaints from clients about an image not having enough resolution, whether that's been digital licensing or whether that's been prints. And when clients contact me for a print, the way that they choose an image, the images that they choose to have printed, are basically because they like the scene. They like the way the scene is captured. They like the mood of the scene. And that has nothing to do with the resolution of the camera that took the picture. So for me, if the image quality is good enough to print commercially, and it pretty much is with every Fuji camera that I use, then from a technical point of view, that's all that I need. So beyond that, the camera's most important aspect in terms of image quality is a creative one rather than a technical one. And while I'm on the subject of image quality, it's worth touching on processing images, because I process pretty much all of my images in Lightroom. I've got Capture One, and I do think that Capture One renders Fuji images better straight out of the camera than Lightroom does. However, I've found that with Lightroom, I'm pretty much able to get the same effect, to get into the same level that Capture One does, with just a couple of minutes of playing around. And I do prefer the intuitiveness, the ease of use of Lightroom, particularly after the latest update with the masking system, which is excellent now. And the whole library system just works better for me in Lightroom. So I'm not really a pixel peeper. I don't spend a lot of time zooming into my images at 200%. It's not something that I find necessary for quality control of prints or things like that. So I've been really happy across all the years that I've been using Fuji cameras with the output that Lightroom gives me. But it's certainly not a perfect system. There are certainly things that I think could be improved. For a start, there's really a shortage of options if you want to shoot really fast and really wide-angle shots. The only lens that Fuji have got that will do that is the 8-16 f2.8, which is a fantastic lens. It's just bigger and heavier than most full-frame lenses. The 10-24 is a great lens, but it's f4. And so if you're shooting Astro or if you're shooting Aurora, you're a little bit limited because the 14mm f2.8, it's not really wide enough. So there are options like the Rokinon 12mm or the Laowa 9mm, both of which I've used, and they're great lenses, but I really do wish that Fuji would produce something like that. Battery life also isn't perfect. It's not ideal. It's never really been a super massive issue for me. If I'm just going out doing landscape photos, then there's certainly enough for me to get through the day just shooting images. But when you start to shoot 4K video or doing things like time lapses, then you can burn through the batteries really quickly. Now, there has been an improvement with the new X-T4 with a larger battery in the X-T4. It is much better. But even so, just doing something like recording this video, it will burn through the batteries very quickly shooting 4K. And if you're using the older batteries in something like the XS10, which has the image stabilization, then you really do go through batteries quickly, and you need to carry quite a few batteries with you if you're going out shooting. Then there are things that aren't quite as relevant to me, things like the autofocus not being as fast and as reliable as it is on moving targets, as it is on a DSLR. But because I shoot landscapes, that's not really an issue for me. Pretty much everything that I shoot is with manual focus, and I really do love the focus peaking that you get on Fuji cameras. I find that fantastic, a fantastic aid for manual shooting. If I was shooting lots of birds, lots of wildlife, then maybe the focus system would be an issue. Also, if I was still shooting weddings, then I would want a much better flash system than what's available with Fuji at the moment. I don't really know that much about it. I know there are third-party options. Maybe people can tell me in the comments how useful the Fuji flash system is. Overall then, I've never really felt that switching from a full-frame system to the Fuji system has compromised my work in any way, neither professionally or personally. It's actually been very liberating for me using a smaller system, a more intuitive system, and really I felt that it's allowed me to focus much more on the creative aspects of photography, on finding the essence of a scene, on capturing the mood of a scene. Now, it's important to say that this is purely subjective. It is a purely personal opinion. As I've said, everyone makes great cameras nowadays, and what works for me, what's intuitive for me, might not be intuitive or work quite so well for other people. It might not help your creative process. So when I get emails from people asking me if they should buy this Fuji camera or this Sony camera or this Canon camera, what I will always say is go and try the cameras for yourself. Get your hands on the cameras, play with them, use them, see how intuitive they are, see how they feel in your hand, see how much the camera makes you want to go out and use it, makes you want to go out and shoot with it, because that's the camera that's going to be the best for you. And what works for you is going to be purely subjective and personal, because Photography means different things to different people. Different people take different things out of photography. As I've said, I'm not really a pixel peeper, but some people are. So the things that matter to me in photography don't necessarily matter to other people, and the things that don't matter to me may necessarily be absolutely vital to other people. So it's really important that you find out what it is that you really care about in your photography. And what I get from using the Fuji cameras, you may just as easily find elsewhere. But what I can say is that after using the Fuji system for over 6 years, it's a system that pretty much satisfies me on every level, both creatively, technically, and professionally. And I'm pretty sure that's it for this video. So if you've got any questions, if there's anything that you're not sure about, drop me an email or a comment in the box below. Now, I hope you found it useful and I hope you found it interesting. And if you like my photography, if you like my approach to photography and you'd like to do a workshop with me, my workshops for 2022 and upcoming for 2023 are up on my website. I'm going to some fascinating places: Namibia, Tuscany, the Dolomites, Iceland in winter. So have a look and drop me a line if there's anything that you're particularly interested in. And as always, thanks for watching, thanks for the support, and take care. See ya.